everyone. Thank you for joining us today in the second season of AI Design Frontiers in collaboration between ArchiNet and Love That Design. Today's talk is starting with Mithun Varghese from LWK Partners. The title is Generative Futures, AI in Architecture and Design. Vikita?
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Season 2 of the AI Design Frontiers. I'm Vikita, the Director of Strategy and Innovation at Love That Design. As Mash mentioned, our topic today is Generative Futures, AI in Architecture and Design. The session today is going to explore how generative AI is reshaping the way in which we conceive, model, and deliver architectural design with a special focus on building envelopes. Mithun, our speaker, will discuss the applications of AI from early stage concept generation to performance optimization, highlighting how machine learning can accelerate workflows and support sustainability goals. The talk will also address the balance between human intuition as well as algorithmic intelligence, offering an insight into the evolving role of architects in an AI augmented future. Thank you so much, Mithun, for joining us today. It's over to you. If you could please share your screen and we can get started. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Nikita. And thank you, Mohammed. Let me just share my screen. I'm Mithun Varghese. I'm an architect. Obviously, I've been working in the Middle East for close to 10 years. And I've always been, I wouldn't call myself a technocrat. I still believe that fundamentally emotions and intuition sort of drives creating spaces which sort of have memory. And then AI in many ways is new for a lot of people, but it's always existed parallelly, as various forms of technology across the ages, and primarily, very, very early, from probably the 10th century, once the invention of robots, the theories of robots came together in early Persia to what we see now, the evolution of the models, which now allow us to actually think with these machines and then try to tap into a sort of a wider narrative and sort of creating better experiences for people. We as a practice, I work with LWK Partners. We're a global practice of about 10 offices. And then I work with the design team here in the MENA office, which is based in Dubai. We do have office in Riyadh also. We fundamentally do the work all the way from pre-concept visioning and all the way to your delivery of the building handovers. For us, primarily, architecture has been about creating memorable spaces. And then when the advent of modern AI, as you would call it, this new age, as everybody sort of started framing it, we do believe that there is a lot of potential in sort of relieving us of a lot of the mundane tasks and then allowing us to actually think, breathe, and then sort of work with people better. With the sort of social construct around us better to create. So I think this is some way I try to put it together, saying that behind facades within spaces, narratives are always waiting to be told. Now, buildings are always, they're just not physical, the way you get into a space, the temperature, the mood, the light, everything sort of drives our moods and allows us to create memories, and which actually influences us, our experiences, and also influences the way we interact with this, with people around us and everything. So I do believe that architecture is so deeply rooted in our fundamental existence. It's all around us. We always present in architecture. So I think it's very fundamental to see the relationship of how we can enhance this by sort of working with machines. And first of all, thank you again. I went through and saw all the presentations, which was done in season 1. It was fantastic. It was really good to see a wide variety of minds and the perspectives that come together. Thank you, ArchiNet, and Love That Design. Fundamentally. So basically, the presentation has got a lot of text, but still, I've sort of compiled a video showing the process of how we create a sketch, just an image, and then how that image gets translated to the concept of a complete building. And then that is mostly on the visual side. And then also I'll talk about how I'm using it all the way. So in terms of how my involvement in my firm is, I start all the way from the first email from a client comes in to actually price a project, understand the brief, and then all the way work with the concept team, develop the concept, sort of try to guide the process with the knowledge I have with the other team members, and then we evolve it together and then take it with the technical team and then ultimately lead out to delivery. we also work early stage on site supervision and all of that. So I believe architects need to be all the way through the process, and AI comes in at different stages and different levels. So as soon as a brief comes in, I can save my time all the way from the very beginning. So I call this, as the old process of AI is thinking with machines. I mean, we need to think with machines. I'm a strong believer of transhumanism, where we're going to go very soon towards a world where once the first pacemaker came, you actually are a transhuman. It sort of supports our body. So now augmenting intelligence in a way is very interesting. And actually, artificial intelligence is also a very, very funny term. So I think when we say we're thinking with machines, there is a very, very nice statement which sort of says that yes, but not one of those antiquated adding machines. It will be a superb, super hyper adding machine, as far from this old piece of junk as you are from God. It'll be something to make you sit up and take notice. That adding machine. It'll be the culmination of human effort, the final triumph of our evolutionary process. I think it's too early to say that in terms of, but I believe that is a fundamental triumph in terms of how we can augment ourselves. And then we come back to the concept. I mean, everybody sees this. There's a lot of people and a lot of voices which say that this is not about artificial intelligence, because intelligence is a very, very broad spectrum word. So I think I do believe and very strongly that is it IA or AI, because it's basically intelligence amplification or intelligence augmentation, creative intelligence. You could have many, many ways how you see it. So that is one of the fundamental sort of concepts. I've sort of set up my presentation into sort of parts, and then I will be running you through these parts now. So basically, part one is about framing the conversation. So the first a season talked about a lot of tools. It touched upon certain aspects of ethics. It also talked about the kind of history, the historicity of the whole thing, of networks and all the models and everything we use. But here we need to look at authorship process, about responsibility, which is also very, very critical aspect of how we use these tools in creating and framing our lives. So I think the first is the aura of the architect. We're living in an AI of, sort of age of AI slop. There is so much AI coming out, mostly through images. But actually, the funny thing is, probably images are only 10% of what we usually use in our practice primarily. There is so much more aspect, and here I believe that the aura has not vanished. It is just moved. It's reframed itself. Now we should focus on our intent, our choices, and our responsibility. The whole idea is that now we free ourselves to actually focus on shift the mundane tasks out, and then actually focus on connecting with community, sort of creating cultural identities, and then sort of tapping into that. And then obviously, we talk about ethos and approach, what needs to be ethos and approach. Now, from the day we are born, our world currently and how we perceive the world is purely framed by the stories we heard. So stories are as much important in the future as how we communicate. It's so much more easier to tell a person a story and make him love that, and it's a fundamental part of our process when we sell ideas to clients and all of that. So I think we're all not coders, so we're all not supreme architects, but we all want to be storytellers. So, I do believe that what we have is a new pen, but everybody has a pen. So now it's about us being able to articulate our narratives. So as long as our intent is strong, we should still be able to release better, communicate better. And I do believe that AI is surely not here to replace humans. It's a sort of a very dark concept fed into our subconscious mind by the kind of apocalyptic movies and the narratives that have come through. And I do believe that this allows us to actually amplify our connection, the connection we've lost with nature, the connection we've lost with community through our devices and everything. AI sort of frees us up to actually rebuild these relationships or try to establish a much broader set of neurons to connect with that. So though the neurons in the machine will actually free our neurons to connect and have better experiences. And now practice is we've always seen, initially we call AI slop. Midjourney is beautiful. A lot of other tools are beautiful, but in architecture, obviously, there was a lot of images coming out which talked about images, beauty, lighting, all of that. Selling ideas. But then we need to then move on. We need to move beyond. We are in an age where a lot of people have moved on. You see a lot of stuff which is happening in 2025 and 2026, looking very interesting. So now we need to obviously define the ethics of how we use it, and ethics of how we practice. using these tools. Now that's very, very critical. Now we come to part two, which is the landscape of the whole setting. And AI, like I said earlier, it's been historical. Historically existed in many forms, but the manifestation of what you see current is only a stage in the evolutionary process of AI. And it's omnipresent. It's been with us since the advent of the mobile phone and the everything. It's always been around. It's been guiding our lives, running our lives. Now. Again, we talk about man and then we talk about the machine. And then very early in the 60s, Negroponte, Gordon Pask with his mobile sculpture, Negroponte before setting up Media Lab, he talked about the architecture machine group. And that's where actually the interfacing with the machine and guiding a machine through a process of creating architecture, space planning, and all of that came together. It was very early, your big room computer times, but systems to converse with started very early, almost 50, 60, 70 years ago. And what we call now as prompt engineering, which probably would disappear in a while, it's a very, very old concept, because they defined conversing with machines, and the syntax is got much more sophisticated. The way people can, it's just been opened up now, so a lot more people can converse with the machines now. So we can think, we can converse with them, and we can think with them. So that is effectively where we are currently. Now, again, going back to the omnipresent nature of AI, it's been an invisible web. As you're talking about something and soon ads pop up in your phone and everything, it's your playlists, you're rerouting traffic, you're optimizing energy grids. They was doing some fantastic stuff in terms of optimizing it, creating building ratings, which is going to influence rental, this thing. So where there's real value, it can get optimized. Even chatbots now set timers, stop chatting, take a break, go and do something else. So, I mean, it's always been a part of our life, ever since the advent of smartphones and sensors and big data being collected together. So it's just now taking new forms to allow us to grow and evolve better. Now, again, we come to the market reality. I think as a broad scope, because of the primary ethical issues around AI, there's a lot of the large scale firm adoptions are very, very low. Okay, there are. I had another presentation at CTBH where there was a presentation by SOM where they're actually building their own GPT, which basically looks at historical models, historical projects, historical models, and everything. And then when a new junior comes in and starting project, there is a lot of data already available to access and then help them ease up the process of aligning with new projects. Obviously, we still have hallucinations and things with that, but now teams and companies, design companies are actually building these systems to allow the work get much more better. But except for some really big firms, the adoption as a general at the firm wide is very less. But what we're having is, obviously, you would have heard the term of shadow users. It's it's the juniors who are actually using it a lot. And then they actually become superheroes. So what's happening is that it's sort of allowed the revolution, instead of coming from top down from leaders, is actually coming bottom up. It's actually creating a lot more interest. A lot more interesting information is being produced. And obviously, small studios and freelancers they're really, really moving faster than the big guys because they are much more agile. They're able to adopt and test whatever is latest, whatever is relevant, whatever can be good. So all of this in architecture, what I'm seeing is a general stroke. This is what's primarily sort of happening. And then now I think I come to a sort of how in practice we've sort of using it. Now, obviously, the presentation, there are sort of many ways we use it and all of that. But before I've got a small video. I just compiled it with. So what I did for the video is that I started with a simple sketch to find some materials. And then I created an image in Midjourney, one image. And then now using Gemini, I was then able to convert that image of the building into one image. I sort of reconstructed the whole building and what the architecture and the experience would be. And then I sort of used a video tool to actually create a narrative around it. The whole concept was that these machines, it's a counter argument against machines. So what happens is that machines and urban systems will actually push nature out. So I created a concept of a rock where a building is in the city. The rock is trying to establish back itself in the city. So the whole process of this is about just trying to communicate an idea. And I put together a small video to show how that is done. So I'll just move on to the video now. So I'm just going to play that. Okay, so basically that video was actually constructed from the first sketch to the actual final video within about 4 hours. So that's where the efficiency comes in. In terms of actually conceiving an idea, putting together a palette, actually giving references to the AI to build a mood board, and then actually translating that into a singular image which captures the emotion of the idea, and then translating that to a construct, iterating it, converting it to video, putting it together, and even the audio. I'm not a very great audio artist, but the audio was also done in AI. So in terms of creating a sort of a quick narrative, a quick emotional storytelling bit, it is sort of very useful. Now, again, the other aspect is in terms of research. Now, there was the introduction talked about, how optimizing data. Now, once you start building, we actually using BIM plugins, which actually tell us there's a wide variety of stuff, which actually go in and standardize your window systems and all of that actually into your whole process, into your whole model. And then that actually tags it and produces and allows us to optimize a lot of the information. Then again, coming back, like I said, in terms of process, the most important aspect we always feel is storytelling. Whatever idea you have, storytelling. So as a broad stroke, a lot of members of the team use it for the storytelling bits. In terms of design, we still evolve the idea by pencil and by our emotional understanding and relationship with the client in terms of how we understand the brief. That intuition is very important for us to build the narratives. But in terms of tapping into new proposals, preparing proposals, we actually use a lot of comparative data and old models basically to generate our pricing strategy. So that basically talks about in terms of how we overall sort of use our use AI as it currently stands within our practice. Now, in terms of moving forward, another important thing I wanted to talk about was that, yes, now this has freed up a lot of time for me. I come back in the evenings, I still want to do my own stuff. Now, also parallelly, there's a narrative. It's about it being used in design in general. So architects, I've seen a lot of architects like to do design from other perspectives. They like to, have other fun design, product design, sort of game design, toy design, lots of things. So my own thing on the side has basically been a lot of toy design and all of that. Now, before we jump into that, another aspect was that, again, in terms of, like I mentioned earlier, this is actually, for us in our workflow, it's actually liberating. It's actually allowing us to think more about the cultural fabric of the site, in terms of how we can better connect with context and nature, in terms of research. Like, for example, earlier doing research for a project to find similar projects, similar scale, similar regional comparativity, and all of that was extremely a tedious process. But now that's got so automated and you get such large data sets. Obviously, these data sets need to be still be curated, but it still allows, that's the stepping stone for us to actually, allow us to automate all the known parameters. So now then we can discover the new unknowns, so the benchmark is moved. We are actually going to discover new unknowns because of all the knowns we can sort of ease the workflow with. Now, this is where I want to come back to another thing which I mentioned about. So I have a lot of hobbies. So one of my hobbies has been designing toys. I've got 3 kids, so I have a small printer at home. I have a lot of fun designing toys. So when these tools came, it sort of freed me up to actually prototype toys. And then I thought, okay, why not? Let's try actually using all AI tools to come to a point of generating a product, a toy product. So obviously the kid adult industry is pretty big, fun art vinyl toys, which you can paint and color with. So there, what I basically did is that I actually want to, instead of putting images and photographs, I actually want to show you what is being done basically on with a toy, sort of a toy design. So I will just go back my sort of screen. I believe you can see my camera, right? Okay, so basically what I did is I basically took a toy, a sort of a core concept, a core idea. I sketched it out. I used Midjourney to generate some images for it. And then after that, I sort of used CSM AI to actually generate 3D models. They were very rough in the early stages. This was about 6, 7 months ago. And from there, I sort of started generating models. And then I used 3ds Max. So what I did is that then I took those toys and I took the model and sort of used my printer, printed out these models. Okay, so these are some of the early prototypes. You see it. And then from there, so these are prototypes. And then once I did the prototypes, I polished them off. I sort of then went and then built up some sort of resin casts to actually start making them at home. So then those resin casts were obviously done on a computer. That was not automated. And then after that, what I did is I basically went in and used ceramic actually to create a sort of a toy. And then parallelly, I've done a lot of research on actually then developing the brand, researching on brands, toy brands, and how actually they can allow us to sort of so this basically the workflow actually allowed me to go in and then develop what do you call it, a toy, which was a fun thing I wanted to do. And I was able to do it. And this wouldn't have been possible. It would be possible still, but it became so much more efficient because of the sort of advantages these tools gave me. So I will reshare my screen to move on the conversation. So I think now we come to another important aspect of this, which is part 6, which talks about the philosophy of intelligence amplification, which we talked about. We're all amplifying our intelligence with these tools, and what is the core philosophy of it? So, as in we call it the centaur. Centaur is you. I believe a lot of people would know what a centaur is. It's about half human and half animal was a centaur, and I believe it was a horse. But here it is. It is half human, half machine. And this is another subtle reference to the cyborg. And then, and it's actually been proven that a centaur combination, a human playing with AI, can beat any supercomputer. You heard Deep Blue beating Gattaca, Kasparov, and all of that. And then what's happened is, but when a human is playing with AI, they're able to beat, all the supercomputers. So actually, this actually proves fundamentally the theory that we must start becoming centaurs. We must practice amplification. And let's forget the word replacement. There is no replacement here. It's just amplification. I think that's a fundamental mental shift we need to make. And obviously, then pulling upon the statement you hear from childhood, from Uncle Ben, who says that with great power comes great responsibility. So I think one of the most fundamental things about AI, and a fallacy in that, is that we all have our biases. We all believe we are not biased. We all believe we are fundamental truth seekers from our own perspective, but fundamentally we are biased. Society is biased. The combined knowledge of society is biased. So if you feed data that is biased, the output will be biased. So our curation, our respect for cultural identity, and being much more ethical in creating data sets and working with it is very, very important, because the built environment is for everybody. So that responsibility is very, very critical in terms of how we operate with these tools. So I think my fundamental, if I had to put my manifesto thinking into something simple, it would be that the machine dreams, but only the human wakes up. The machine will keep dreaming, if we don't allow it to wake up at the time and remember the dream. Now, it's our job again to interpret these dreams and build a reality that is very, very inclusive, sustainable, and beautiful. And this is a new frontier for us. So I think it's very, very important that we sort of work together to sort of create more beautiful, more beautiful experiences for people. Yeah, I think that basically closes my presentation. I'm not sure if I used the 35 minutes. So let's talk. If anyone's got any questions, that'll be great.
Thank you, Mithun. And we definitely thank you again for this talk, and waiting for everyone questions on the chat. So I believe we can start with questions. The first question from Ben: the machine dreams only the human wakes up. So really very apt. Thank you for the presentation and sharing your insight with us. Could you share more information about the tools that you use to create the toy that you made it?
Okay, so the tool, in terms of the toy, what was done is that I initially did a sort of a rough ideation sketch. I'm not a very, very great hand artist, to be truthful about it. So I did just a sort of a rough shape. I've been inspired by Bear Brick and a lot of that. And then what I did is I used Midjourney to create some conceptualization, but I realized that the prompt adherence was not very solid. So then what I did is that I used the first iteration, I had to actually generate a rough model of what was similar using CSM AI, CSM 3D AI. I don't know, the website's been down for a couple of this thing, but you can use Meshi and Tripo 3D, all these guys. Or if you don't want to spend any money, you can install Pinocchio on your computer, and it's got the Huneean 3D model. It generates extremely high models, even architecture models from Midjourney Render. It creates models which are like finely detailed, even tree stems, in a few seconds in a basic sort of a 3D software. And now the thing is that in toy, then once I took that model, I had to obviously work in Max to clean it up. So there is a substantial input we have to do in terms of, and then I beautified it a bit, softened it a bit, changed the design to a bit more practical. And then what I did is I have a printer at home, and then I iterated it. I sort of got the right proportion and the sense and size for me to fit it into hand. Then after that, I've got a small workshop set up. I just then used a silicon, basically watched some YouTube videos, created a silicon, what do you call it, cast, and then did some more research, found some ceramic paste mixes, ready-made mixes, put it in, popped it out, done. So that was in terms of creating the product. After that, in terms of research, I sort of researched brands, all of that to basically create more information.
Yeah. You framed AI as intelligence augmentation rather than replacement. At what point does augmentation begin to influence judgment, not just efficiency?
No, I do think that augmentation, there is always a critical question of what augmentation is. So augmentation it's about what we use in our process, like, how we use it in our process. If it's if it's a process where I'm querying a brief, like for example, I've got a master plan, I'm querying brief, I'm getting technical information, I'm trying to verify the code. Yeah. So a lot of the use happens in terms of primarily about 80% of our use happens in technical queries, trying to get as much technical validation, technical queries. And the trick we use to avoid hallucinations is I run the queries on two parallel models. So if there is a discrepancy, then I will look at specificity of it. Now, yes. Now, in terms of authoring and how it can influence authoring, I do believe that we as designers, if we believe that everything comes from our mind purely as new, that's a fundamental flaw, because everything we create is already coming from our subconscious, which is influenced by the world around us. So we also operate on a stack of memories. The whole thing is that we just tap into it and we just feel this is the right thing. So that is in many ways what's happening in AI. It's probably unsophisticated now, but we also operate fundamentally by creating memories and then diving into these memories to create new combinations. And that, I believe, is the same thing happening in AI. So the question of authorship, it's a dicey question.
Yes.
I hope I've answered.
Yeah. So next question from Tala. At early concept stage, how do you decide what should remain intuitive and human-led versus what can be meaningfully explored through AI?
Yes, I think one of the first things from early concept stage for ideation is primarily understanding the brief in terms of what experience are you trying to create. And what we do in that stage is that we always sort of imagine, because the AI cannot just create an image. I still need to tell it to imagine a sphere and the type of light I want, the type of, yes, Midjourney, for example, is not very clean. It adds its own drama to it. It's got an aesthetic engine on it, so it creates its own beauty. But actually, some of the other ones like Google and all of that, Nano Pro and everything which is coming new, it's very articulate. It actually allows you to describe what you want. So first, we identify some experiences. We see how the brief or what the brief needs as a response. And once those words sort of start becoming a sort of a spatial definition. And these spatial definitions go through iterations and cycles and back and forth. And then one of the tricks I use is which is a new recent trick, I haven't defined it yet, where you actually create a rough image of the space. And then you ask some of the new ones to zoom in and zoom out. So what it does is it actually zooms into parts of that builds in detail, and then when it zooms out to the original image, it's actually become much more richer, much more articulated. So I think these are some of the ways we sort of use it in our early phases right now. That is once design starts.
Okay, so next question from Dr. Wasim. With the rapid integration of AI tools in architectural design education, what academic, ethical, and pedagogical limits should be defined to ensure that AI supports rather than replace students' critical thinking, conceptual development, and core design skills?
Yeah, I think this is a very, very important question in terms of coding. See, we have the problem, right? We have this fundamental problem. We are training it on memory and data. And when we architecture students and all of that, the way we are using it, when we were in architecture school, none of this was there. We had to go through the hard grind and everything, we were still scavenging libraries for books, and we were still working in the book age. I had a Nokia which didn't even have a display screen, it's a green and black display screen. So in the new age, yes, it is very fundamental to, and I think it's a part of the educational system, how this is framed. Saying the tools are not good is the wrong approach. The tools are here. Rather, allowing the tools to be part of the narrative, part of the learning curve is very important because these tools are here. They're not going away. So taking a stance of understanding it better, understanding them better as they evolve and become more collaborative, that is more what it is. Actually, they should be used as learning tools. In schools, you should actually tell kids that do more research because you have these tools. Make sure your research and background is much more stronger because it frees up time, and make sure your design shows a chain of thought, of how you've used your research and translated it. So I do believe that as teachers, there is a lot of guidance which needs to go into the process. And rather than shying away, we should sort of embrace it and adopt it in the right manner. And critical thinking is a fundamental thing that has to exist. AI can't do everything. We still have to do a lot of things to guide them.
Uh, Let's go to more practical questions. In your case in LWK, how has AI helped reduce design hours or simply shifted them elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, we've had cases where presentations. See, I'll tell you, the primary thing is design a project. We have to look at the practice as a whole. So, in terms of practice as a whole, so all the way from the first email from the client comes in, okay, that's so you get 100 project opportunities to bid, for example, and then you need to iterate through that. And usually, conversion rates on an average firm is about 7 to 10%. So what happens is there is a lot of optimization that happens in the early stage where you don't lose hours because these hours have to go somewhere as cost end of the day. So obviously that is one part of the job. Once the job comes in, AI tools are used in many ways. Like, for example, we had to go to animation studios to get animation done, all of that. Now, what happens is that the tools are so sophisticated. Okay, we ultimately are trying to sell an idea. So if you're trying to sell an idea, earlier animation rendering on a computer, all of that, it's really expensive. It's like 60,000 AED, to get a minute out of a high-end studio. So now what happens is if you can articulate and use your tools well, you can actually put together a quick animation, put everything together. So even at early stages, you're able to sell these ideas a lot, sell your ideas in much stronger manner. So that way, there's a lot of efficiency in different ways you can add in. That is in terms of design. In terms of delivery for the BIM side, evaluation, code evaluation, some of the tools are very early, but that still allows a lot of optimization. In terms of clash, for example, in BIM, you've got clash detection and resolution. I'm just testing a software now. I've just managed to get a test this thing where actually there is a bit of clash detection and resolution. So a certain threshold, it resolves it. And that saves hours. These are a lot of hours. You've got 8, 9, 12 people working on a project. Yeah.
And does, let's say, that change how you price design services or manage project fees?
Yes, to a certain extent, because see, the market is very dynamic. So you've got like clients who have larger appetite, types of projects which have larger appetite. You have different categories of buildings. So, for example, residential, let's say you got luxury, non-luxury, everything, and so the appetites of clients are different. So we're working on multiple models. So when the client comes to you, we understand the client, we look at the brief, what their criteria, what their parameters are, and then we say, okay, we'll have to use this model. If they require an animation and the budget is not high, we would rather use the AI animation set for that. So we obviously this allows us to price competitively in certain domains, and it sort of creates a better balance for us.
Mm. So there's a question from Ahmed, and we can wrap up with it. Do you think AI improves design as a process or as a product?
Yeah, I think design is a process and product both. I don't think isolated at all. As a product, yes, in terms of product, in a way, it can influence a lot, but still, right now, the tool just says that we still have to play a fundamental role in sort of creating that product. But in terms of the process, yes, it's more on the process side now. Probably gradually on the product side, yes. Like for example, optimizing detailing, getting the appropriate waterproofing detailing, getting the appropriate information, all generated by AI is actually optimizing it. It will compare data, find you the best thing for the place you're designing for, and all of that. So yes, mostly on the process side now, as far as I see it. But yes, downstream on the product side also, you could have much more.
Mithun, thank you again for being with us today, and everyone who was today and answering the questions. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
You
you.
have a good
Thank you.
evening.
And the next session is actually going to be with our colleague Takbir Fatima, and the talk will be titled "In Search of a Prompt: Spatial Hallucination," and it's going to be on Wednesday, 28th of January at the same time, 7 p.m. Saudi time. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.